Clara Winters shifted in her seat as Secretary General Amara slid the folder across the polished oak table. The United Nations emblem gleamed under the soft light of the conference room, but it was the unusual sigil next to it, a series of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, that caught her attention. "You're our top choice, Clara," Amara said, her expression serious but tinged with something Clara couldn't quite place. Excitement? Concern? "The Seraphites specifically requested someone with your diplomatic record." Clara's fingers brushed against the cool surface of the folder. Inside were the details of what was being described as the most significant diplomatic appointment in human history. Earth's first ambassador to the Seraphites, an advanced alien civilization that had made contact with humanity just 18 months ago. "Why me?" Clara asked, though she already knew her credentials were impeccable. At 38, she had successfully negotiated peace agreements in 3 major global conflicts and established herself as one of the UN's most effective problem solvers. Still, this was different. This was interspecies diplomacy. Your adaptability, your empathy, your ability to find common ground where none seems to exist. Amara replied, "The Seraphites value these qualities. They've studied our diplomatic corps extensively, and your name kept rising to the top." Clara opened the folder, scanning the first page. The mission would last 2 Earth years. She would travel to the Seraphite homeworld, Lumina, aboard one of their vessels. She would represent humanity's interests while learning about their culture and establishing the groundwork for future relations. "There's one thing the briefing doesn't mention," Amara said, her voice dropping slightly. "The Seraphites communicate differently than we do. They've developed a neural interface technology that facilitates deeper understanding between species. It's part of the ambassadorial role." Clara looked up sharply. "Neural interface? You mean they want to connect to my brain somehow?" "It's been tested extensively with human volunteers," Amara assured her. "It's safe, temporary, and allows for instantaneous translation and cultural context. You'll understand their intentions with perfect clarity, and they'll understand yours." Clara frowned. The idea of an alien species having access to her thoughts made her uncomfortable, but the opportunity was extraordinary. To be the first human to truly understand an alien civilization from the inside. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. Amara nodded. "Of course. But the Seraphite delegation leaves in 2 weeks. We'll need your decision by Friday." As Clara left the UN headquarters, New York's skyline gleamed in the afternoon sun. She felt the weight of the folder in her bag, the weight of the decision on her shoulders. This was the culmination of everything she'd worked for, a chance to make history, to bridge the gap between worlds. By Friday, her answer was yes. The Seraphite vessel hung in Earth orbit like a massive, crystalline snowflake, refracting sunlight in patterns that seemed both mathematical and artistic. Clara's shuttle approached it slowly, giving her time to appreciate its alien beauty. "Preparing for docking," the pilot announced. "Ambassador Winters, please secure yourself for the approach." Clara tightened her harness, eyes fixed on the growing structure. This would be her home for the 3-month journey to Lumina. Her stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The docking process was smoother than any Earth vessel she'd experienced. One moment they were approaching, the next they were securely attached, with barely a tremor to indicate they'd made contact. Her welcoming committee consisted of 2 Seraphites, tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their faces were almost human in arrangement, with 2 large eyes that blinked vertically, no visible nose, and small mouths. They wore flowing garments that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as their ship. "Ambassador Winters," one of them spoke, their voice melodic and accented, but perfectly understandable. "I am Liaison Ilara. This is Medical Officer Thane. Welcome aboard the Luminescent Path." Clara bowed slightly. "As she'd been instructed," was their preferred greeting. "Thank you for your welcome. I'm honored to represent Earth on this historic journey." "The honor is ours," Ilara responded, their skin shifting to a warmer hue that Clara would later learn indicated pleasure. "We have prepared quarters for you that we hope will be comfortable. After you have rested, we would like to begin the integration process." Clara's heart skipped. "Integration process?" "The neural interface," Thane explained, their voice deeper than Ilara's. "It is best implemented early in our journey, allowing you time to adjust before we reach Lumina. I was told there would be more briefing on how exactly this works," Clara said carefully. Ilara's skin rippled with blue patterns. Concern, perhaps. "Of course, we will explain everything in detail before proceeding. Nothing will be done without your full understanding and consent." Clara nodded, trying to mask her unease. "Then I look forward to learning more." Her quarters were surprisingly comfortable, a spacious room with Earth-like furnishings that must have been specifically designed based on human preferences. The bed was standard, the bathroom facilities familiar, and there was even a small library of physical books alongside a terminal that provided access to Earth media and communications. After a brief rest and a meal of surprisingly tasty synthesized Earth food, Clara was escorted to what appeared to be a medical facility. The room was dominated by a reclined chair surrounded by equipment that looked both familiar and alien, scanning devices reminiscent of MRIs alongside crystalline structures whose purpose she couldn't begin to guess. Ilara and Thane were joined by a third Seraphite, introduced as Elder Mentor Vex, who appeared older, their skin patterns more complex and subdued. "Ambassador Winters," Vex began, their voice carrying a weight of authority. "We are grateful for your willingness to serve as the bridge between our peoples. The neural interface is central to this mission's success. Please explain how it works," Clara requested, taking a seat in a normal chair across from the three aliens. "The interface is a two-way connection," Vex explained. "It allows for perfect translation, but more importantly, it provides cultural context and emotional understanding that would take years to develop naturally." Thane stepped forward. "The process involves the placement of a small crystalline node at the base of your skull. It's minimally invasive and causes no discomfort after the initial adjustment period." "And what exactly will you have access to?" Clara asked directly. "My thoughts? Memories? Only what you consciously choose to share," Ilara assured her. "The interface facilitates understanding, not intrusion. Your private thoughts remain your own unless you actively direct them through the connection." It sounded reasonable, but Clara sensed they weren't telling her everything. "And who exactly will I be connected to?" The three Seraphites exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "As our first human ambassador," Vex finally said, "you have been granted a great honor. You will share a connection with the royal family of Lumina." Clara frowned. "The royal family? I thought I'd be working with diplomatic officials." "On Lumina, the royal family are the diplomatic officials," Ilara explained. "They are specifically trained from birth to represent our people. The current family consists of Sovereign Orion, Consort Lyra, and their offspring, Rigel and Vega." "And they'll all be in my head?" Clara asked, the full implications beginning to dawn on her. "Not physically, of course," Thane said quickly. "The interface allows their consciousness to share space with yours, to observe through your senses when appropriate, and to communicate directly. It is difficult to explain in human terms. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. This was far more invasive than she'd been led to believe. I need to consult with Earth before agreeing to this. We understand your hesitation, Vex said, their tone gentle but firm. However, we are now beyond the range of real-time communication with Earth. Any message would take days to reach them, and days more to receive a response. Clara realized with a start that this had been deliberately planned, waiting until they were too far from Earth for her to easily consult with her superiors. This is not what I agreed to, she said firmly. The details of the interface were left deliberately vague in our communications with your leaders. Vex admitted, human minds are not accustomed to the concept of shared consciousness. We feared it would create unnecessary alarm. So you lied, Clara stated bluntly. We omitted, Ilara corrected. Ambassador Winters, please understand, this is how our people have communicated with all new species we've encountered. It has proven the most effective way to build true understanding. Clara stood up, anger rising. I need time to think about this. Of course. Vex agreed readily. Take all the time you need, but know that without the interface, your role as ambassador will be severely limited. You would be little more than a tourist on Lumina, unable to truly participate in meaningful diplomatic exchange. Back in her quarters, Clara paced the floor, weighing her options. She could refuse the procedure, effectively rendering her mission a failure before it even began. She could demand to be returned to Earth, creating an interspecies incident that might damage humanity's relationship with the Seraphites for generations. Or she could agree to their terms, allowing alien consciousnesses into her mind in the hope that it would serve the greater good of human-Seraphite relations. After hours of contemplation, she made her decision. The procedure itself was surprisingly brief. Clara lay in the reclined chair as Thane applied a local anesthetic to the base of her skull. She felt a momentary pressure, then a strange warmth spreading through her head. The node is in place, Thane announced. We will now initiate the connection. You may experience some disorientation at first. Clara tried to prepare herself, but nothing could have readied her for the sensation of other presences suddenly occupying her mind. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelmingly strange, like having 4 additional sets of thoughts layered over her own, distinct but intertwined. Ambassador Winters. A voice spoke directly into her mind, bypassing her ears entirely. I am Sovereign Orion. Welcome to our shared consciousness. Clara tried to respond verbally, but found she didn't need to. Her thoughts formed a reply automatically. This is overwhelming. The sensation will become more natural with time. Another voice, feminine, melodic, added, I am Consort Lyra. We are honored by your acceptance. 2 younger presences made themselves known as well, Rigel and Vega, the royal offspring, curious and slightly less controlled in their mental touch. We will remain passive for now. Orion's mental voice explained, as you adjust to our presence, we will gradually increase our interaction. For the moment, simply go about your activities. We will observe and learn. Clara spent the next few days in a state of constant awareness of her mental passengers. They kept their word about remaining passive, but she could feel them there, watching, listening, experiencing everything through her senses. It was like having constant companions who never spoke unless spoken to, yet never truly left her alone. Slowly, she began to adapt. She learned that she could direct questions to specific members of the royal family, and they would respond only to her, not to each other. She discovered that they could show her images and concepts directly, bypassing language entirely, a form of communication so efficient and nuanced that words seemed clumsy by comparison. "Why the royal family?" she asked Orion one evening as she ate dinner in her quarters. "Why not just one diplomatic representative?" "Our family represents the 4 pillars of Seraphite society," he explained, sending her concepts rather than mere words. She understood instantly that Orion embodied leadership and vision. Lyra represented culture and harmony. Rigel stood for innovation and progress, and Vega for community and care. Together, we provide a complete perspective. Lyra added, "One consciousness alone would give you an incomplete understanding of our people." It made sense, in a way, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than they were saying. As the weeks passed and the luminescent path continued its journey toward the Seraphite homeworld, Clara settled into a routine. She spent her mornings studying Seraphite history and culture through the ship's database, her afternoons in meetings with various crew members, learning about their roles and responsibilities, and her evenings in mental conversation with the royal family. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her thoughts became more structured, more deliberate. She found herself adopting Seraphite expressions and mannerisms without consciously choosing to do so. Most disturbingly, she occasionally had thoughts or reactions that didn't feel like her own, brief moments where she felt like a passenger in her own mind rather than its owner. "It is natural," Vega assured her when she raised these concerns. "The interface creates harmony between minds. Some blending of thought patterns is to be expected." But Clara wasn't convinced. One morning, she found herself standing before a mirror, studying her own face as if it belonged to someone else. She raised her hand, watching her reflection do the same, but the movement felt oddly disconnected, as if someone else had initiated it, and she was merely following along. "Who did that?" she demanded internally. "Who moved my hand?" There was a moment of silence from her mental companions. "I apologize," Rigel finally responded. "I was curious about the mechanics of human movement. It was not my intention to alarm you." Clara felt a surge of panic. "You can control my body." "Not control," Orion interjected quickly. "Influence, in moments where your own control is relaxed. It was an accident, I assure you." "This is unacceptable," Clara stated firmly. "I agreed to share my perceptions, not my autonomy." "Of course," Lyra soothed. "Rigel will be more careful. This will not happen again without your explicit permission." But the incident shook Clara deeply. She began to pay closer attention to the moments when the royal family was most active in her mind, noting patterns and testing boundaries. She discovered that they were most present when she was interacting with other Seraphites, subtly guiding her responses and reactions. They were least active when she was asleep, though never completely absent. Most concerning, she realized they could access her memories. She caught Vega reviewing her diplomatic training, Lyra examining her childhood experiences, Orion studying her past negotiations. They weren't being malicious, they seemed genuinely interested in understanding her better, but the intrusion felt violating nonetheless. "You said you would only have access to what I consciously shared." She confronted them. "That was a simplification," Orion admitted. "The interface does not distinguish between types of consciousness. Your memories are as accessible to you as your current thoughts, and thus they are accessible to us as well." Clara felt betrayed. "You should have explained this clearly before I agreed." "Would you have agreed if we had?" Rigel asked, their mental tone genuinely curious. Clara had no answer for that. As they approached the halfway point of their journey, Clara's concerns deepened. She began to notice gaps in her awareness, brief periods where she had no memory of what she'd been doing or saying. These episodes coincided with important meetings with the ship's senior officers, discussions about Earth's resources, or conversations about humanity's technological capabilities. One evening, she confronted the royal family directly. "You're taking control when I'm not paying attention. You're using me to gather information." The mental silence that followed confirmed her suspicions. "It is not as nefarious as you suggest." Orion finally responded, "We are merely ensuring that our understanding of Earth is complete. The information we gather will help us form a more beneficial alliance." "Yeah, that's not your decision to make." Clara insisted. "I'm the Earth's representative. I decide what information to share. Your role is to facilitate understanding." Lyra countered gently. "We are helping you fulfill that role more efficiently." Clara realized with growing horror that they viewed her not as an equal partner in diplomacy, but as a convenient vessel, a means of accessing human knowledge and experience without the messy complications of true negotiation. She began to resist. She developed mental exercises to maintain her awareness at all times, to recognize when they were attempting to assert control. She started keeping a private journal, encrypted and password-protected, documenting her experiences and concerns. Most importantly, she began asking more pointed questions about Seraphite intentions toward Earth. The answers she received were invariably diplomatic, emphasizing mutual benefit and cultural exchange. But through the interface, she occasionally caught flashes of something else. Brief, unguarded thoughts from the royal family that suggested their interest in Earth went far beyond friendly relations. One night, as Clara drifted towards sleep, her mental guards lowered by exhaustion, she caught a fragment of communication between Orion and Lyra that they hadn't intended for her to perceive. "Once we have established the neural network through the human diplomatic corps, expansion to their leadership will follow naturally. Within a generation, the Earth sphere will be fully integrated into the collective." Clara feigned sleep, careful not to react to what she'd overheard. The collective? Neural network? These terms hadn't appeared in any of the materials she'd studied. Over the next few days, she carefully probed for more information, asking innocent questions about Seraphite relations with other species. The answers were always positive, emphasizing successful alliances and mutual prosperity. But Clara noticed that specific details were always vague, and attempts to learn about actual visits to these other worlds were gently but firmly redirected. As they entered the final month of their journey to Lumina, Clara's suspicions crystallized into a terrible certainty. The Seraphites were not seeking allies, they were seeking subjects. The neural interface wasn't a tool for understanding, it was a mechanism of control. She needed to act, but her options were limited. She was alone on an alien vessel, millions of miles from Earth, with 4 alien consciousnesses embedded in her mind. Any overt resistance would be immediately detected. She needed allies. Clara began to pay closer attention to the ship's crew, particularly those who interacted with her regularly. Most were deferential and formal, clearly aware of and somewhat awed by the royal presence she carried. But one, a junior science officer named Tarek, seemed different. His interactions with her were more direct, less filtered through protocol and deference. During one of their regular meetings to discuss Earth's ecosystem, ostensibly to prepare for potential Seraphite visits to Earth, Clara carefully broached the subject. "The neural interface is fascinating technology," she said casually. "Has it always been used for diplomatic purposes?" Tarek's skin rippled with a pattern Clara had learned to recognize as discomfort. "The royal interface is quite different from standard neural connections," he said carefully. "It is an honor reserved for the most important diplomatic engagements." Royal interface, Clara asked, noting the specific terminology. Is that different from what other Seraphites use to communicate? Tarek hesitated. Perhaps this is a question better directed to your companions. Clara sensed the royal family stirring in her mind, preparing to assert themselves, but she pushed forward. I'm asking you, Tarek, scientist to diplomat, I'm trying to understand your people better. His skin patterns shifted rapidly. Conflict, consideration, decision. The royal interface is unique in that it allows for deeper integration. Standard neural connections between Seraphites are more balanced, more equitable in their design. Equitable how? Clara pressed. They do not permit one consciousness to guide another without consent, Tarek said carefully, his eyes darting to the side as if checking whether they were overheard. Clara felt Orion pressing forward in her mind, preparing to take control of the conversation. She resisted with all her mental strength, maintaining her focus on Tarek. And the royal interface does permit this? She asked quickly. I have spoken inappropriately, Tarek said suddenly, his skin paling to a formal neutrality. Please excuse me. Ambassador, I have duties to attend to. He left abruptly, but Clara had her confirmation. The interface she carried was designed specifically for control, not just communication. That night, as she prepared for sleep, the royal family confronted her. Your conversation with Science Officer Tarek was concerning, Orion stated, his mental voice stern. I was simply trying to understand your technology better, Clara replied innocently. There are appropriate channels for such inquiries. Lyra added, Junior officers are not authorized to discuss the intricacies of royal technology. I didn't realize there were restrictions on what I could learn, Clara said, letting a hint of her true feelings show. That seems contrary to the spirit of open diplomatic exchange. Some technologies are sensitive, Rigel explained. Just as your Earth governments have classified information, some aspects of our civilization require appropriate clearance. Clara decided to take a risk. Like the collective? The shock that rippled through the four consciousnesses was palpable. Clara felt them withdrawing slightly, conferring among themselves in a way that excluded her. Where did you hear that term? Orion finally asked, his mental voice carefully controlled. I don't recall exactly. Clara lied. Perhaps in one of the cultural briefings. It seemed significant. More private consultation among the royal family. Then Vega spoke up, the first time the youngest had taken the lead in addressing her directly. The collective is simply our term for the broader Seraphite community. They explained. Nothing sinister, I assure you. But Clara could sense the deception. She had touched on something important, something they hadn't intended for her to know about. The next morning, Clara found herself summoned to a meeting with Elder Mentor Vex. The older Seraphite's skin was a muted palette of formal patterns as they greeted her. Ambassador Winters, I trust your journey has been enlightening thus far. Very, Clara replied neutrally, aware of the royal family's attentive presence in her mind. We will be arriving at Lumina in 23 Earth days. Vex continued. Before our arrival, there is an important aspect of your role we must discuss. Clara waited, alert for any new revelations. Upon reaching Lumina, you will participate in a ceremony officially recognizing you as Earth's ambassador. This ceremony includes the completion of the royal interface. Completion? Clara asked, her apprehension rising. I was under the impression the interface was already complete. Vex's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. What you currently experience is merely the preliminary connection. The completion integrates the interface more fully, allowing for more. Seamless interaction. Inside her mind, Clara felt the royal family's approval of this explanation, which only heightened her suspicion. "What exactly does that mean?" she pressed. "It means the occasional discordance you have experienced between your thoughts and those of the royal family will be harmonized," Vex explained. "The boundary between consciousnesses becomes more permeable, allowing for true unity of purpose." Clara fought to keep her expression neutral as the implications became clear. The completion would essentially erase the boundaries protecting her autonomy. She would become a true vessel for the royal family, her own consciousness submerged beneath theirs. "I see," she said carefully. "And this is standard procedure for all ambassadors?" "For those granted the honor of the royal interface, yes," Vex confirmed. "The ambassadors from the SETI Alliance, the Proxima Confederation, and the Tau worlds all underwent the same process. They serve now as vital links between their homeworlds and Lumina." Clara noted the present tense. "They're still serving as ambassadors? For how long?" "Oh, indefinitely," Vex said, as if this were perfectly normal. "Once the royal interface is completed, the connection is permanent. The ambassadors become living bridges between worlds, carrying Seraphite wisdom back to their people. Carrying Seraphite control." Clara translated silently, careful to shield the thought from her mental passengers. The picture was becoming clearer. The Seraphites established these living bridges with multiple species, using them to gradually extend their influence, their collective, across other worlds. "I'll need time to prepare myself for this ceremony," Clara said, feigning acceptance. "Of course." Vex agreed readily. "The royal family will guide you in the necessary preparations." As Clara left the meeting, her mind raced with plans and possibilities. She had just over 3 weeks to find a way to prevent the completion and somehow warn Earth about the true nature of the Seraphite Alliance. Her first step was to learn more about the other ambassadors Vex had mentioned. Using her access to the ship's database, she researched the SETI Alliance, the Proxima Confederation, and the Tau worlds. The information available was limited and uniformly positive, emphasizing the benefits these civilizations had gained from their association with the Seraphites: technological advancement, cultural enrichment, and interstellar security. But reading between the lines, Clara noticed disturbing patterns. Each civilization had experienced rapid changes after establishing formal relations with the Seraphites. Traditional power structures were replaced with new governance systems that emphasized harmony and collective welfare. Independent scientific research dwindled, replaced by joint projects overseen by Seraphite advisors. Cultural expressions became increasingly homogenized, incorporating Seraphite aesthetic and philosophical elements. They weren't allies, they were colonies. Their uniqueness and independence gradually eroded through subtle influence and control. Clara needed to confirm her suspicions. She sought out Tarek again, finding him in one of the ship's laboratories. "Science Officer Tarek," she greeted him formally, aware that their conversation might be monitored. "I had some follow-up questions about Seraphite ecosystem management that might be relevant to Earth's preparation." Tarek seemed wary, but agreed to speak with her. Clara guided the conversation through innocuous topics while discreetly writing on a small notepad she carried. "Need to speak privately. Important." Tarek's eyes widened slightly as he read the note, but he gave no other indication of surprise. Instead, he continued their discussion of pollination systems while writing his own reply. "Hydroponics Bay, 3rd cycle, emergency maintenance." Clara understood. The ship operated on a cycle system rather than Earth's 24-hour day. The third cycle would be equivalent to late night by her reckoning, when most of the crew would be in their rest period. That night. Clara waited until she sensed the royal family's attention diminishing. They never truly slept, but they did enter periods of reduced activity when she was resting. She had been practicing techniques to shield her thoughts, creating a surface layer of drowsy, dreamlike consciousness while maintaining alertness underneath. When she judged the moment right, she slipped out of her quarters, telling the guard outside that she needed to walk to help with insomnia, a complaint she had strategically mentioned several times over the previous weeks to establish a pattern. The hydroponics bay was dimly lit during the rest cycle, the only illumination coming from the soft bioluminescent panels that provided optimal growing conditions for the alien plants. Clara moved carefully through the rows of vegetation, some familiar, others utterly alien in form and function. "Ambassador." Tarek's voice came softly from behind a tall stand of fern-like plants. "We must be quick and careful." Clara joined him in the secluded corner. "The royal family is less active while I rest, but they're never completely absent. I'll try to keep them distracted." Tarek nodded, his skin showing patterns of anxiety and resolve. "What you are doing is dangerous." "What the Seraphites are doing is dangerous," Clara countered. "Tell me about the collective." Tarek's skin paled. "You know more than you should." "Not enough," Clara said urgently. "I need to understand what I'm facing. What Earth is facing." Tarek hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "The collective is the true Seraphite civilization, not just our physical presence, but our connected consciousness. For millennia, all Seraphites shared a limited neural connection, allowing for perfect understanding and cooperation while maintaining individual identity." "What changed?" Clara prompted when he paused. "The royal lineage," Tarek said, his voice dropping even lower. 10 generations ago, a genetic mutation emerged that allowed certain individuals to dominate neural connections, to influence and eventually control others through the interface. These individuals became the first royal family, and they used this ability to take control of your society. Clara guessed. Tarek's skin showed patterns Clara hadn't seen before. Grief, perhaps, or deep regret. Most Seraphites don't even realize they're being controlled. The influence is subtle, building over generations. The royal consciousness becomes part of their own, guiding their thoughts and desires until they can no longer distinguish between their own will and that of the collective. "And now they're expanding to other species," Clara said, the horror of it settling in her gut. "Using ambassadors as their initial footholds." "Yes," Tarek confirmed. "Each ambassador undergoes the completion ceremony, after which they return to their world as a perfect vessel for royal influence. They begin to advocate for closer ties, for more Seraphite involvement, for adopting our technologies, particularly neural interface technologies. And gradually, more and more people on each world become part of the collective." Clara finished. "Not through conquest, but through subtle infiltration." "Precisely," Tarek said. "Within a few generations, the influenced species believes joining the collective was their own idea, their own desire." "Why are you telling me this?" Clara asked. "Why risk opposing your own rulers?" Tarek's skin displayed a complex pattern that seemed to indicate resolve mixed with fear. "Because some of us remember what Seraphite society was before the royal lineage. Some of us believe in true cooperation, not domination disguised as harmony. There's a resistance." Clara realized. "A small one," Tarek admitted. "Too small to openly oppose the royal family, but perhaps large enough to help prevent Earth from falling to the same fate as the SETI." the Proxima, and the Tau. How? Clara asked urgently. The completion ceremony is in 3 weeks. Once that happens, I won't be able to resist them anymore. There may be a way, Tarek said hesitantly. The royal interface technology has a vulnerability, one the royal family has kept secret. The crystalline node at the base of your skull contains a resonance chamber. If it receives a specific frequency of sonic vibration, it can be reset. Reset? You mean turned off? Not exactly, Tarek explained. More like returned to its original state, a balanced connection rather than a dominated one. You would still carry the royal consciousness, but they would no longer be able to influence or control you without your explicit permission. Hope flared in Clara's chest. How do I access this frequency? That's the difficult part. Tarek admitted. The frequency generator is in the medical bay, heavily secured, and the royal family would detect any attempt to use it on you. Unless they weren't present, Clara said lowly, an idea forming. Is there any way to temporarily block the connection, even for a few minutes? Tarek considered this. There is a chamber on the ship used for neural reset procedures, a room lined with crystals that block all neural transmissions. It's used when crew members need to have their standard interfaces adjusted or repaired. Could we use that? Clara pressed. Possibly, Tarek said, though his skin patterns showed doubt. But access is restricted, and your absence from the royal consciousness, even temporarily, would cause immediate alarm. Then we need a distraction, Clara said firmly. Something significant enough to draw attention away from me. They spoke quickly, formulating a rough plan. Tarek would recruit a few trusted crew members from the Resistance. They would create a cascade failure in the ship's secondary systems, nothing dangerous, but complex enough to require the attention of the senior officers and disturb the royal family's concentration. During this distraction, Clara would enter the neural reset chamber with another Resistance member who had access to the medical facilities. They would block the royal connection long enough to apply the resonance frequency to her interface node, resetting it to a balanced state. The risk is enormous, Tarek warned. If we fail, the consequences for all involved would be severe. And if we do nothing, Earth becomes another extension of the Seraphite collective. Clara replied, I didn't come all this way to become the instrument of my world's subjugation. They agreed to act in 5 days, giving Tarek time to make the necessary preparations, while Clara continued to behave normally, giving no indication of her knowledge or intentions. Those 5 days were the most difficult of Clara's life. She maintained her routine, engaged with the royal family as expected, and continued her diplomatic duties while constantly guarding her thoughts. She developed a technique of focusing on genuine diplomatic questions and concerns, using her real interest in understanding Seraphite culture to mask her deeper suspicions. On the morning of the 5th day, Clara awoke with a sense of grim determination. Today would determine not just her fate, but potentially the fate of Earth. She went through her morning routine with a deliberate calm, reviewing the plan in the most protected corners of her mind. The distraction was set to begin during the ship's second cycle, when she was scheduled to attend a cultural presentation in the main gathering hall. The timing was crucial. The hall was close to the medical bay where the neural reset chamber was located, minimizing the time she would need to be away from her expected location. As Clara sat in the gathering hall, watching a presentation on Seraphite artistic traditions, she felt the familiar presence of the royal family in her mind. They seemed particularly interested in this presentation, as it highlighted the evolution of Seraphite expression under royal guidance, propaganda disguised as cultural education. Clara now recognized, precisely on schedule. A series of alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The lights flickered, and the environmental systems in the gathering hall began to malfunction, the temperature dropping rapidly. "Please remain calm," the presenter announced as confused murmurs spread through the audience. "This appears to be a technical malfunction. Please proceed to your quarters or designated safety areas until the issue is resolved." Clara felt the royal family's attention shift, their focus drawn to the sudden crisis. She sensed Orion connecting with the ship's command structure, Lyra reaching out to calm the crew, Rigel analyzing the technical aspects of the failure, and Vega monitoring the responses of those around them. It was her chance. As the gathering dispersed in orderly confusion, Clara slipped away from her security detail, moving quickly through the corridors toward the medical bay. She found the entrance exactly where Tarek had described it, and as promised. A Seraphite medical technician was waiting, a female named Mira, whose skin showed patterns of nervous determination. "Quickly," Mira whispered, guiding Clara through the medical bay to a small, crystalline chamber at the rear. "The system's failure will only divert attention for a short time." The neural reset chamber was a small room with walls, ceiling, and floor made of the same crystalline material as much of the ship, but with a different configuration. The crystals here were arranged in tight, interlocking patterns that somehow disrupted neural transmissions. As soon as Clara stepped inside, she felt the royal presence in her mind dim dramatically. It wasn't gone completely. She could still sense them at the very edges of her consciousness, like distant voices heard through thick walls, but they could no longer access her thoughts or influence her actions. The relief was tremendous, but there was no time to savor it. Mira quickly positioned Clara in the center of the chamber and produced a small device that looked something like a tuning fork made of the same crystalline material as the interface node. "This will be uncomfortable," Mira warned, positioning the device at the base of Clara's skull. "But it should not cause permanent damage." Before Clara could respond, Mira activated the device. A high-pitched tone filled the chamber, but the sound was secondary to the sensation that ripped through Clara's head, a vibration that seemed to penetrate to the core of her brain, setting off cascades of neural activity that made her vision blur and her knees buckle. Mira caught her before she could fall, holding her steady as the resonance continued for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only seconds. When it finally stopped, Clara gasped, her head throbbing with residual pain. "Did it work?" she managed to ask. "We'll know when you leave the chamber." Mira replied, "If it worked, you should still sense the royal consciousness, but they will no longer be able to influence you without your permission." Clara took a moment to steady herself, then nodded. "I'm ready." As she stepped out of the chamber, the royal presence in her mind surged back to full strength, but different now. Where before she had felt them as commanding presences capable of asserting control, now they seemed more like distinct entities sharing her mental space, clearly separate from her own consciousness. "Well, what has happened?" Orion's mental voice demanded, confusion and anger evident. "The connection has been altered." Clara didn't bother to hide her thoughts now. "Yes, it has. I know about the collective. I know what you intended for me, and for Earth." Shock and outrage flooded from the royal consciousness. Clara felt them attempting to assert control as they had before, pushing against her mental boundaries. But where once those boundaries had been permeable, now they held firm. "Hence, this is treason," Rigel declared. "You have damaged a royal interface. The penalties are severe. No more severe than the fate you planned for me and my world." Clara replied firmly, "I didn't agree to become your puppet, or to help you turn Earth into another of your controlled worlds." "You understand nothing," Lyra insisted. "The collective brings peace, prosperity, advancement." At the cost of freedom and self-determination. Clara cut in. That's not a price Earth is willing to pay. Alarms began to sound again, different from those of the engineered malfunction. Clara realized the royal family was alerting the ship's security. Ambassador Winters. A voice came over the ship's communication system. Report your location immediately. Medical scans indicate a disruption to your neural interface. Clara looked at Mira, who gestured urgently toward a secondary exit. Go. There's an access corridor that will take you to the diplomatic quarter. We'll try to delay them. Thank you, Clara said sincerely, for everything. As she hurried through the narrow corridor, Clara felt the royal family continuing to push against her mental defenses, searching for weaknesses, attempting to regain control. But the reset had worked. She could contain them now, keep them separate from her own thoughts and actions. By the time she reached her quarters, security alerts were sounding throughout the ship. She had minutes, at most, before they came for her. Quickly, she accessed her secure terminal and began recording a message to be transmitted to Earth. She explained everything she had learned about the Seraphites, the collective, and their method of subtle conquest. She detailed the neural interface technology and its vulnerabilities. Most importantly, she warned that under no circumstances should Earth allow further Seraphite involvement in human affairs until proper safeguards could be established. She had just finished the recording when her door slid open. Elder Mentor Vex stood there, flanked by security officers, their skin patterns conveying shock and anger. Ambassador Winters, Vex said formally, you are confined to quarters pending investigation into the damage to your royal interface. This is a serious breach of diplomatic protocol. Is that what you call it? Clara replied calmly. I call it self-defense against an attempted hostile takeover. Vex's skin darkened with what might have been shame or anger. You have been misled by malcontents and traitors. The royal interface is an honor, not an invasion. Then why hide its true purpose? Clara challenged. Why not be honest about the collective and its expansion? Most species are not ready for such concepts, Vex said dismissively. They must be guided gradually toward the greater harmony. Guided, controlled, subjugated. Clara countered, call it what you will. Earth will not submit to it. Inside her mind, the royal family had fallen silent, perhaps realizing that their plans had been exposed and their immediate influence over her had been neutralized. Oh, what happens now? Clara asked. Do you imprison me? Kill me? Either way, my message to Earth has already been queued for transmission. They'll know everything by the time you reach any decision. This was a bluff. The message was recorded, but not yet transmitted. But Vex couldn't know that. The Elder Seraphite's skin showed complex patterns that Clara couldn't fully interpret. Calculation, perhaps, or reassessment. You leave us in a difficult position, Ambassador. Vex finally said, the diplomatic incident you have created could damage relations between our peoples for generations. The diplomatic incident you created, you mean? Clara corrected. When you decided to use me as a Trojan horse for your conquest of Earth. Vex was silent for a long moment, then dismissed the security officers with a gesture. When they were alone, the elder's demeanor changed, becoming less formal, more direct. The collective has existed for 10,000 years. Ambassador Winters. In that time, we have brought dozens of species into our harmony. Not one has regretted the transition, once completed, because they lost the capacity to regret it. Clara pointed out, because their very thoughts were shaped by the royal consciousness. Is that so different from how your own cultures shape the thoughts of your people? Vex asked. Through education, media, social pressure, the The collective simply makes the process more efficient, more harmonious. The difference is choice, Clara insisted. Humans may be influenced by our cultures, but we remain free to question, to resist, to change those influences if we choose. Your collective removes that choice. Vex sighed, a very human gesture that surprised Clara. Perhaps you are right, in some ways. Perhaps the collective has lost its way since the emergence of the royal lineage. This admission startled Clara. You're part of the resistance? I am part of many things, Vex said enigmatically. I have served the royal family for centuries. I have watched as world after world joined our collective, and I have wondered if what we offer is truly as beneficial as we claim.
Oh.
Then help me, Clara urged. Help me prevent this from happening to Earth. Vex's skin rippled with conflict. What you ask is not simple. The royal family's influence extends throughout Seraphite society. Open opposition is problematic. I'm not asking for open opposition, Clara said. I'm asking for a chance to present Earth's case, to negotiate a true alliance, not a takeover disguised as one. For a long moment, Vex was silent, skin patterns shifting rapidly. Finally, the elders seemed to reach a decision. The completion ceremony cannot proceed without your voluntary participation, Vex said carefully. If you were to diplomatically refuse, citing cultural incompatibility, it would create a precedent. The royal family might be persuaded to seek a different form of alliance with Earth. Would they accept such a refusal? Clara asked skeptically. Not easily, Vex admitted. But with proper framing, it could be presented as a unique opportunity to develop new forms of interspecies cooperation. Inside her mind, Clara felt the royal family stirring again, their mental touch more cautious now. We hear your conversation, Orion's mental voice said directly. What Elder Mentor Vex suggests is unprecedented. So is resetting a royal interface. Clara pointed out, we're in uncharted territory already. The collective has survived and thrived through adaptation, Lyra added, her mental tone thoughtful. Perhaps this is another opportunity to evolve. Clara sensed conflict among the royal consciousnesses, Orion and Rigel resistant to the idea of changing their approach, Lyra and Vega more open to considering alternatives. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Winters? Orion finally asked. A true alliance, Clara replied firmly. One based on mutual respect and consent, not subtle domination. Earth would welcome cultural exchange, technological cooperation, even limited neural interface technology if it's truly balanced and consensual. But we will not surrender our autonomy or our right to self-determination. And if we refuse these terms, Rigel challenged, then I expose everything I've learned about the collective to Earth and every other species you haven't yet fully absorbed, Clara said simply. I doubt the SETI, the Proxima, or the Tau are completely under your control yet. How would they react to learning the truth? It was another bluff, but a calculated one. Clara couldn't know for certain how far the Seraphite influence had spread in those civilizations, but she suspected the process took generations to complete. There would still be individuals capable of independent thought, of resistance. The mental silence that followed told her the bluff had worked. The royal family was weighing their options, calculating risks and benefits. What you propose would fundamentally change the nature of the collective's expansion. Orion finally said. Yes, Clara agreed. It would transform conquest into true cooperation. Isn't that what the Seraphites originally stood for before the royal lineage emerged? This struck a chord. Clara could feel it resonating through the royal consciousness. For all their arrogance and ambition, the royal family still considered themselves the guardians of Seraphite values and traditions. "We will consider your proposal," Orion conceded reluctantly. "Until then, you will remain under guard, but treated with full diplomatic courtesy." It wasn't victory, but it was a reprieve. Time to plan, to communicate with Earth, to build a coalition of resistance among the Seraphites and perhaps other species. "Thank you," Clara said, both aloud to Vex and mentally to the royal family. "I believe we can find a path forward that benefits all our peoples, without sacrificing the principles that make each of us unique." As Vex left her quarters, Clara felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that she had avoided immediate disaster, anxiety about the challenges ahead, but also a growing sense of purpose. She had come to Lumina to represent Earth, to build bridges between worlds. That mission hadn't changed, only her understanding of what it truly entailed. In the weeks that followed, Clara became the center of intense diplomatic negotiations, with the help of Vex, Tarek, and other sympathetic Seraphites. She managed to transmit a heavily edited version of her message to Earth, warning them about the true nature of the neural interface technology without explicitly revealing the Resistance's existence or actions. Earth's response was cautious but firm, backing Clara's position and insisting on full transparency and autonomy in any future alliance. This external pressure, combined with the internal questions Clara had raised among the Seraphites themselves, created an opening for real change. The royal family, still present in Clara's mind but no longer able to control her, gradually shifted from adversaries to reluctant partners in negotiation, through their shared consciousness. Clara gained insights into their perspective, their genuine belief that the collective represented the pinnacle of civilization, their fear of chaos and conflict, their conviction that their guidance was necessary for less advanced species. In turn, they experienced through her the human commitment to freedom and self-determination, the value humans placed on diversity of thought and individual choice, and the creative potential that emerged from allowing different perspectives to flourish independently. By the time the luminescent path reached Lumina, a new form of agreement was taking shape, one that would allow for cultural and technological exchange without neural domination, that would respect the autonomy of each species while fostering genuine understanding between them. As Clara stood on that observation deck, watching the crystalline spires of the Seraphite homeworld coming into view, she felt a complex emotion that wasn't entirely her own, a blend of her human anticipation and the royal family's bittersweet acceptance of change. "It's beautiful," she said, both aloud and mentally. "Yes," Orion agreed, his mental voice carrying resignation and dawning respect. "Different from what we planned, but perhaps beautiful in its own way." Clara smiled. It was just the beginning of a long and challenging process, but for the first time since discovering the truth about the collective, she felt genuine hope for the future, not just for Earth, but for all the worlds touched by Seraphite influence. She had come to be an ambassador and had nearly become a vessel. Instead, she had become something far more important, a catalyst for transformation, a true bridge between worlds, not by surrendering her identity, but by standing firmly in it while reaching out to understand others. As Lumina grew larger in the viewport, Clara straightened her shoulders and prepared to begin the real work of diplomacy. The royal family might still be in her head, but now they were passengers on her journey, not the other way around. Together, they would forge a new path, one that honored the best of both their worlds, while leaving room for each to remain distinctly itself. It wasn't the mission she had accepted back on Earth, but it was the one she had found, and perhaps the one that mattered most.